Good morning. Let us start with the opening recitations. Dola Tawa Jebe Dra Nova Jebe Ge Tarapadan Tom Je Kembe Bardu Jobra Jeba Tom Jege Jebe Ma Nanga Dang Nyambe Zenjen Tom Je Deva Dan Ten Dungya Dang Je Nudu Lana Me Pa Yang Tabra Sobe Changju Rinpoche Tobra Dala Tongva Jebe Dra Nobar Jebe Ke Tarpa Dan Tam Je Kempe Bardu Chopra Jeba Tam Jege Su Jebe Mha Nangka Dang Nyampe Senchen Tam Je Dewa Dan Den Dungya Dang De Nudu Lana Me Pa Yang Dabra Zobe Janju Rinpoche Tobra Dala Dhamma Jebe Ka Nopara Jebe Ke Tarapata Tam Che Kempe Bardu Jobra Jeba Tam Che Gisa Jebe Ma Nung Kadang Nyampe Senche Tam Che Dewa Dan Den Dungya Dan Nudu Lana Me Pa Yang Dabra Zobe Janju Rinpoche Tobra Sama Keki Bardu Lunga Yesu Gewa Lango Mashi Bardu Lunga Yesu Gewa Lango Tu Derene Sonte Nema Chan Ta Samji Bardu Lunga Yesu Gewa Lango Sonje Chodan Soke Chonam La Janchu Bardu Dane Kyapsu Che Dake Jinso Gebe Sonam Ge Drala Penchir Sanje Drupra Sho Sanje Chodan Soke Chonam La Chanchu Bardu Dane Kyapsu Che Dake Jinso Gebe Sonam Ge Drala Penchir Sanje Drupra Sho Sanje Chodan Soke Chonam La Chancho Bardo Dane Gyabzu Je Dagi Jinzo Gebe Sonamgi Drola Penche Sanje Drubro Shu Kada Lampe Senjen Tamje Dewa Tang Dewe Gindan Dempra Gyuji Dumyao Dang Dumyao Gi Gyudang Drava Gyuji Dumyao Mebe Dewa Tangme Drava Gyuji Nidin Chadang Nidang Drava Tang Nyong La Napra Gyuji Kadang Nampe Senjen Tamje Dewa Tang Dewe Gindan Dempra Gyuji Dumyao Dang Dumyao Gi Gyudang Drava Gyuji Dunga mebe dewa dhamme drava juje nere chadang nidang drava dhamyam la nebra gyuju. Gadang dhampe senchen tamje dewa dang dewe gyudang dhamra gyuje dumyam dang dumyam ye gyudang drava gyuje. Dumyam mebe dewa dhamme drava gyuje Nere chada nidang drove dhamyo na nebra yu. In all the worlds of the 10 directions reside Tathagatas of the 3 times. Before each of you lions among humans, I prostrate joyfully with body, speech, and mind. By the power of this aspiration to noble deeds, all conquerors appear vividly in my mind. With as many bodies as there are atoms in all lands, I prostrate to all you conquerors. In each atom are Buddhas numberless as atoms, all in the midst of the heirs of the Buddhas. Thus I conceive of this Dharma Dhatu as completely filled with you, conquerors in this way. With infinite oceans of praise and oceans of diverse melodies, I sing the excellent qualities of all you conquerors, and praise all of you gone to bliss with the best flowers and best garlands, best music, ointments, and excellent parasols, finest lamps, and superior incense. I offer to you, conquerors, with excellent garments and best fragrances, and sandalwood powder heap high as Mount Meru. All wondrous offerings perfectly arranged, I offer to you, conquerors. These vast and unequal offerings to each and every one of you, conquerors, with the power of conviction and noble deeds, I prostrate and offer to all you conquerors. All the harmful deeds that I have done with my body, speech, and mind under the power of desire, hatred, and ignorance, I confess each and every one of them. I rejoice in all the meritorious deeds of all conquerors in the 10 directions and the heirs of the Buddhas. Solitary realizers, hearers still in training, and beyond and all wandering beings. You who are lamps of the worlds of the 10 directions, who have unobstructedly attained Buddhahood through the stages of Bodhi. All you who are my protectors, please turn the unexcelled wheel of Dharma. With palms together, I earnestly beseech you who may intend to manifest final nirvana. Please remain for as many eons as there are atoms in the world for the happiness and well-being of all wandering beings. Whatever slight virtue that may have been gathered through prostrating, offering, confessing, rejoicing, requesting, and beseeching, I now dedicate to complete Bodhi. This ground sprinkled with scented waters and strewn with flowers, adorned with the supreme mountain, four continents, sun and moon. I visualize as a Buddha land and offer it. May all wandering beings experience such a pure land. To the Gurus who possess the three kayas, I offer the outer, inner, secret, and thusness offerings. With my body, wealth, and all phenomenal existence, please grant the unsurpassed supreme attainment. Whatever slight virtue I may have gathered through prostrating, offering, confessing, rejoicing, requesting, and beseeching, I now dedicate it all to complete Bodhi. Om Guru Devada Kinira Namandala Pratija Soha. Please turn the wheel of Dharma of the greater, lesser, and common vehicles in accordance with the dispositions and mental capacities of sentient beings. Durje chachente le naroda, mamita popa duchi den kunka den sun den zawe lam ne shab sa ju lam ma yin kam chodong la su wa de tu ta ju jin ju. Kya den di kumme sam ne kya sa pe tun sun yong la kya. So me kya wa durje chang pa ji den kumpe shab la du du ta tu sam yun kyo le me ji ji lo shi tu je chen ne kya wa ka sa ne kya sen ro de du tu pra ji ji. Pema geza thongpo la yasen choki ma pinye, pema chone she shun ka polo kanto mungpo kora kege jese ta te keje je lo che she so so, guru pema se de hong, choki nye ke polo ne to chen sa je kunji mo mo ne, rasen choko mo chon ton se pa, sawe la me shab la so wa. So let us read to refresh one time, stanza 57 to 59. The teeth, the hair, the nails are not the eye. An eye is not the bones or blood. The mucus from the nose and phlegm are not the eye, and neither is it made of lymph or pus. The eye is not the body's grease or sweat. The lungs and liver likewise do not constitute it. Neither are the inner organs eye, nor yet the body's excrement and waste. The flesh and skin are not the eye, and neither are the body's warmth and breath. The cavities within the frame are not the eye, and eye is not accounted for in sixfold consciousness. So this last line, the I is not accounted for in sixfold consciousness, introduces actually the next section. And according to the commentaries, this next section is Shantideva's response to two non-Buddhist systems. They are called Sankhya and Vaiseshika. So these are non-Buddhist, and so these are ancient Hindu kind of philosophical traditions that Shantideva is responding to, refuting. Right? And the theme is the same, which is how this self, this self that we cherish so much, this self that we instinctively, feel, assume to exist, cannot be found when we actually go looking for it. So we started looking at Khenpo Kumpel's commentary for these three verses, 57, 58, 59. And so I do want to continue looking at that commentary closely so that we get a taste of how these traditional commentaries are done. Before that, I want to say a little bit about searching for the self, how to search for the self, what is the purpose of doing this search or this analysis, you could say that. But analysis, maybe that word sounds a little bit more theoretical and distant, analysis. But search, search, who is this? What is this? Who is this I? Where is it? If it exists, which I feel it exists, and nobody even taught me, I instinctively know it exists. But then now Buddha says, now you need to search for it. So then let me say a little bit about why the need to search for it, how to search for it, and what happens when you start searching for it, and what happens if you find it or if you don't find it. Of course, we all know the Buddha's basic teachings teaches that there isn't a self, or that's normally how we say it, that there is no self, or it is not self. So this is the teaching on anatman, or in Pali, anatta. Atta or atman is self, an is negation. So not self or no self. And so that is, often how we all kind of know. Here, I think Shantideva's approach might be helpful in understanding how does this teaching on not self or no self is supposed to work. So what do I mean by Shantideva's approach? Shantideva's approach here is, he says, you have to search for this self that you instinctively think it exists. And he shows us that if we start searching for it, we will not be able to find it. This unfindability, not being able to find the self when you search for it, this not being able to find, the fact that the self is unfindable is what Shantideva emphasizes. So the way Shantideva approaches this is that he doesn't immediately take you to anatta, anatman, not self, emptiness. Right? Because those are very strong words, right? Emptiness, not self, non-self. And I think so many of us, strangely kind of like on some level, we get that, we understand that, we like that. But then on another level, when we start to think about it, then we say, do I really understand it? We have a hard time. And I think there are many reasons, why this is the case. But one of the reasons is that, not the only, but one of the reasons is that these are strong words, not self, no self. And then going even further, emptiness, empty of self. So this is a little hard, So Shantideva here, the method he uses here is to say, no, let's search for this self. And here the implication of not being able to find this self isn't that, oh, absolutely self doesn't exist. Keyword here, absolutely. So the implication, the conclusion, when you search for the self and you cannot find it, is not that, oh, self doesn't exist, oh, it's empty. But because Shantideva does not deny that both you and I, and himself included, when you take a needle and you poke our hand, it's like, ouch. if you didn't know the needle was coming, you would ouch very loud. If you knew the needle was coming, you know, like if you're going to get a shot, you don't ow out loud, you know, maybe someone's watching, you know, like, so whether we're, or ouch, right? There are some, you know, experiences going on. We undergo pain and pleasure. And there is someone, so to say, that is experiencing, having these experiences. But when you search for this someone, it's very hard, or according to Shantideva, impossible to find this person, this self. So what the search for this self does then is to show us, to convince us that the self doesn't exist as the body. And the self doesn't exist as some kind of spiritual entity that is hiding somewhere in this body. And to the degree that some kind of self obviously is being experienced, some kind of self obviously exists, to the degree that that self exists, it exists as a mental imputation, as projected by mind, as nominally, superficially held together, designated. Lesson there is that, therefore, very fragile. And further from, and the lesson or the implication, fragile, therefore what? Therefore, don't grasp at it. So it exists like a rainbow. It exists like a mirage. Then some of us might say, hey, didn't you just say it exists as an imputation of the mind? Then you might say, oh, isn't the mind then the self? So how does Shantideva respond to that? Shantideva will say, well, go look for this mind then. Can you find anything there that can serve as a unchanging, abiding entity? No. So even when we say, oh, it's an imputation of the mind, right? That phrase is a projection of the mind, right? Even that, right? We're not saying this mind is real. This mind itself, when you search for it, when you look closer into it, then it too exists, just like a rainbow, just like a mirage. Now, so when we're doing this searching, right? When we're doing this kind of analysis, so then we come to this understanding, we come to this conclusion. Oh, in fact, the self that I so instinctively believe to exist, and sometimes feel so strongly it exists, especially when we're suffering. One example often used is like, when the self, is experienced in a very strong way, when we have been falsely accused of having done something terrible that we did not do. Oh, in that moment, the self is so strong, right? But first step in this kind of meditation, you can call it that, because meditation means to get used to, right, is to see how, right, the self that we have instinctively believed to exist actually cannot exist in the way we think they exist. So that's the first step in this exercise, in this meditation. Somewhat intellectual, yes, of course, at this point, but it's okay, because there is step 2. Step 2 is coming. Right? So the conclusion from step one is that which we call self only has nominal existence. Existence based on designation, based on projection. Yeah, so here you don't have to say, self don't exist at all. But no, it exists, but it exists only nominally, not ultimately. The second step in this meditation, in this training, is to then, so with that, right, with the conclusion that you arrive at in the step one, kind of in your background, right? Now, you can take the second step, which is to pay attention to when things appear to us, right? So things can be a particular person comes into our mind, a particular situation comes into our mind, or even yourself comes into your mind, like I'm thinking, Han, me, I. So when that self appears, right, look carefully. Does it appear to be only nominally existent, existing by designation, or existing as composite, or does it appear to be objectively real, intrinsically existent, and solid? In less philosophical expression, which is then, it means, you're like, no, this is very real, like this I. We can begin to see that then habitually, whatever appears to our mind, whatever appears, in other words, whatever we encounter, we don't encounter them as only nominally real. We encounter them, including ourselves, as intrinsically real. We experience every situation as intrinsically real, every problem as intrinsically real. And that earlier knowledge that we arrive at through analysis, that, oh no,
to the degree that things exist, and especially self exists, it exists only by designation. But now, when we pay attention to how things appear, or how even ourselves appear to ourselves, these things, these selves, appear as if they exist in and of themselves. They exist from their own side. It's a common phrase in explaining this. Like things appear to exist on their own side. What that means on their own side is we believe our perception of things is based on because the thing is truly like that, failing to recognize that things only appear to be like that, or like that, or like that, because of the perceiver. It's as simple, in a way, as simple as, the English expression, beauty lies where? In the eyes of the beholder. That statement is actually very much, in agreement with the Buddha's teachings. Beauty, and therefore ugly and neutral. Where does this quality of beauty or ugly or neutral actually exist? It does not exist in the object. It exists in the eyes, so to say, of the beholder. Yes, so appearances only appears. Appearances only appears to be. They are not what they appear to be. And they appear to be real, solid, existing on their own side, including the appearance of self, and especially the appearance of self. It only appears like that. So this is second step. So in this second step, right, in this meditation, there are a few kind of areas you can kind of emphasize, right? Now, one area is what we just talked about. Right? The other area, so to say, is to see that, oh my gosh, there is this gap, this discrepancy between how, from the first step, things only exist nominally by designation as a projection of the perceiver. But then, on a day-to-day basis, from a moment-to-moment basis, I experience them as solid, as real, as existing on their own side. So seeing that discrepancy, you can rest your mind in that discrepancy, so to say, which is a reminder to us. That is when you let that reminder sink in. There's a discrepancy. There is a big gap between how things truly are and how they appear to me. How self truly is and how self appears to me. How they truly are is they exist by designation. They exist nominally. Or we could also say things exist interdependently. Self exists interdependently. Not independently. Not in and of itself. So when this kind of analysis, when this search is applied to analyzing, searching for the self, this is where we arrive at the unfindability of the self. Another way to say what this unfindability of the self is also the recognition that there is a discrepancy between how things appear and how they truly are. Or you could also say that this is a knowledge, this is an insight that things don't exist the way they appear to exist. So however you phrase it, the unfindability of this self, there is a discrepancy between how things appear and how they truly are, or things do not appear the way, things do not exist the way they appear. However you phrase it, that is what we mean, according to Shantideva, by emptiness. And he says, at that point, so the third step, you rest your mind in that insight. You let that insight remain vivid, remain clear, and let it sink down, and sink down. Sink down to what? Sink down to layers and layers of more subtle ways in which we fixate, in which we cling, in which we grasp onto self as real, as ultimately existing. Then the third step. So initially, the ability to rest in this insight will be very short. Just a few moments, just a few minutes, because the mind is not stable. Its habits, it then will wander. So don't try to do this resting for too long, because then sometimes also this resting is the lazy rest can turn into the lazy and dim resting, and not actually resting in this insight. So they say, at the beginning, you should not try to do this too long. But the front part, you can spend longer time, because it's engaging the monkey mind, the searching, and seeing the discrepancy. So it's giving the mind something to work on. And because the mind is now, our untrained minds are kind of addicted to distractions. So initially, then step 1, step 2 should be like maybe 90% of the session. And step 3, only 10%. So then it becomes, 85-15, 80-20, 70-30. So this is what we call analytical meditation, followed by placement. Functionally, analytical resembles what we more commonly know as vipassana or special insight, and placement functionally seems to then correspond to shamatha, calm abiding. But here, the order in which this is done is reverse, right? Normally you hear, oh, you start with calm abiding and then you do insight. So let's see if there are any questions and comments about these 3 steps.
Dr. Lai,
Yes.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So at the end, you mentioned we start to shift from 90-10 to 85-15. Slowly move step 3 with let's say more significance there, right? Is it probably because we start to realize that step 3, it's somehow the foundation of 1 and 2, that it starts to be more present in 1 and 2 as we think probably at the beginning?
Mm-hmm. Go ahead and translate the question, like literally translate it.
Okay. Should I switch to Spanish or? Oh, well, I mean, Claudia is doing it, so.
Yeah, Claudia can do it.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, it's a good question. So let me clarify what I said in case it wasn't clear. When I say shift, I don't mean like you deliberately shift. I mean that you will begin to have more and more ability to do more of 3, and there's less of a need to do 1 and 2. And yes, there's less of a need to do 1 and 2 because the insight that you're resting in 3 is, as you say, I think this is what you're saying, the foundation. 1 and 2 is meant to discover the insight that you are resting in 3. So if the insight that you're resting in step 3 is still kind of fuzzy, it's still just momentary, right? Like how sometimes we read these teachings, we go, aha, right? That's the insight, right? Aha. And then 5 minutes later, wait, what was that again? Or somebody say, oh, what aha? Can you tell me? Yes. And then you're like, actually, never mind. Yes.
Dr. Lai, sometimes we don't have like the aha moment. So, but we have something like, what the heck I was thinking? Why did I think this was like this when it is not? But I guess that when we say what the heck I was I thinking, is like still grasping something. So I think that even if it is like a realization of something, is not the conclusion we are looking for, right? That we still need to work because we are placing something else instead of the initial thing.
Can you substitute what you just said with concretely in this case? Like, I'm not sure if I got your question. So you say like what the heck? Like what the heck? What? Finish it. Yes.
Like I was thinking,
lay
this
it out.
Was, for example, this person was like this and that, and there was this thing that I was thinking, and then you realize.
Okay, just give a word. Oh, this person is a jerk. Okay, go from there.
A jerk, because he did, you know, he sent troops to Ukraine, you know, and then you start like placing.
Yeah, so then you don't go more stories there.
Okay, and then you say, well, it is one aspect, and I don't know other aspects of him, and I think that he is not only that, he must be something else, etc., etc. So you say, well, it is wrong to me, or it is not him, this jerk only. He is something else. And then, well, of course, he's not only a jerk. He is not one thing or the other. He's several things, and well, you can get like, well, I was wrong thinking this, and then, but then you say, I am wrong, so you are grasping to something else. So I guess that you need to continue working on that.
Working on what?
On your perception, being, because you say, of course, it is not this, but then you are still labeling him some other way.
No, you don't label.
Okay.
So this exercise is not, oh, he's not just the invader. He's also a father. He's also a son. He's also a lover. He's also a neighbor. No. You don't go into all of that. You just see, oh, this label that I have is the label, and the label appears to be the entirety of what this is. Stop there.
Okay. So there is no
discrepancy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is not about, so that you can vote better, to provide more funding to counteract or not. No. There's something else.
Yeah.
And secondly, the point is, maybe I also was unclear. I said, whether it's people, situation, or all that, actually start with self. Start with how self appears to self.
Okay.
Don't go into this world problems, That's so complicated.
Well, I guess that is easier because you have an access to your own experience. So
yes, so start with self.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So translate, you don't have to literally translate us working through all the, but the gist. Yeah. Thank you. So start with how I appear to me. As you said, Antonio, because you have access to, right, more direct access to you, so to say. So then more powerfully, more easily, you can see the discrepancy. So it is said that it's relatively easier to purify the ignorance or confusion pertaining to the substantiality of persons, specifically your own person, than it is to purify the confusion or ignorance with regards to the insubstantiality of phenomena, of conditions, of impersonal, other than self factors. And then I think one of the important points that you raised in your question, or at least I heard that, and I want to bring this, want to say something. It's like, yes, of course, you still have to work on it. Even if, even if you have achieved what's known as, arrived at what's known as the path of seeing, which corresponds to the first Bodhisattva, Bhumi. The path of seeing, that means you have seen the truth of selflessness, of persons. You have seen that. But it's not until the 8th Bodhisattva Bhumi before you have completely dispelled the confusion with regards to that. So even after arriving at the first Bodhisattva Bhumi, where you directly see truth, so to say, you need 7 more levels to get rid of all the habits that have formed over many countless lifetimes of the habits formed based on not seeing. Yeah, of course. Step 1 and step 2, when we do it, we have some insight, some conclusion, then we rest in that. But doesn't mean that that conclusion is what you see on the path of seeing. It's closer to, but not necessarily it yet. Go ahead, Linda.
Can you use the 16th breath meditation as a kind of a structure to help with this? It seems like some of the realizations can pop up out of the 16 breaths too.
Yes, so Linda is referring to the Anapanasati method of the 16 stages of relying on breath to develop this insight. Yes, slightly different from Shantideva's method, but of course they are aimed at the same thing. The 16 steps in the Anapanasati and elsewhere, the Buddha taught that on many different occasions. It's basically using 4 frames of reference with regards to our experience. So beginning with body, then sensation, and then mind, meaning mental activity, and then phenomena. And in each of these 4 contexts, you begin with breath as the object, then you look closer at this body, analyze, and with regards to the body, mainly the focus there not so much in the Anapanasati itself, but basically you see how the body is what we call impure. And then sensations are suffering. Mental factors, mental activity is impermanent. And phenomena is not self. So those are the 4 characteristics of all experiences, all phenomena. Here in this Shantideva's, the approach here is using 3 steps, and mostly just on the subject of what is the status of this self. If this self exists, how does it actually exist in comparison to how it appears to exist?
Yeah.
May?
I was thinking sometimes, I have this image of what I look like, what my voice sounds like, how I think. And then I see pictures of myself or a video of myself, or I hear, my own voice. And then it seems very different. It's like, what I think I look like when I see a video, it's like, I look like that. Or I hear a recording of my own voice and I think I sound like that. And there's a gap there. And I think, I wonder what else I think I look like or smell like. Maybe I have body odor, I don't know it. And then it's sort of a disconcerting, and unsettling thing. And that's why I don't like to see pictures of myself. I don't like to hear my own voice. I don't like to hear, because it doesn't mesh with what my concepts are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, go ahead and translate this comment. Yeah. Yeah, I think many of us, that's a good example, especially now with social media and, and also with digital cameras. You can take infinite number of photos of yourself, selfies, of other people. So some of us are, very sensitive about seeing our own photos, hearing our voice, recording. And I think that is a good measure of how fixated we are on who we think we are. And if there's evidence out there that proves the opposite, we don't want that. We can't stand it. And so that's a good place to look at, how strongly you react to a photo that is either flattering or unflattering that is floating around out there. More importantly, whether it's flattering or unflattering, is it points to the discrepancy between who you think you are and then now some other evidence that contradicts that. And even like the photo that you don't like, or the recording that you don't like, or the video that you don't like, of you, even there, you know, like how you don't like it, right? Shows that you think that that is somehow caught something real about you, and you don't want to accept that reality. So you have imputed realness, concreteness, to like the photo capturing you at a moment when you go, or you're chewing not right, you know. Even when we know, like, well, nature of a photo is that it captures a moment, right? But then we don't want that moment to kind of like be the public image of me, because somehow we believe like that is real, and we believe that other people believe that that is real, etc., etc., etc. So let's take a 7-minute break, and then we'll come back and read Campbell Kumpel's commentary.
Om Wage Jore Mum Wage Jore 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 Om Wage Jore Om Wage Jore Mum 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 Wage Jore wage joare mum 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 wage joare mum.
So if you have this translation of Khenpo Kumbel's commentary, the Nectar of Manjushri's speech, we are at page 347. Yeah, so here, right, he is talking about, he's unpacking, elaborating on the exercise in the meditative exercise, the contemplation in verse 57, 58, 59, which is to say that when you go searching for the self, for the I, with regards to when you search for it in this body, through this body, none of these parts of this body can you find this self, can this I be found. So at the bottom of 346, he says, all these elements, meaning these physical elements, consist of many separate components. So for example, we say, oh, is it the heart? Well, even the heart, is not a thing. The physical organ of the heart, it's many other components. Or we say the liver or the kidney, right? Kidney is not a thing, liver is not a thing, it's a system, in fact, of many different parts. So he says they arise from, they consist of many separate components and arising from infinitesimal particles. So atoms, in other words, infinite number of atoms build up those parts that build up the systems that we call the heart, the kidney, the liver. And he says, and then they are all impermanent. These atoms are constantly arising, abiding, ceasing, coming into existence, destroyed. In the wake of the destruction, something is generated. Cells are dying, cells are being born every moment. He continues, he says, neither individually nor in the aggregate, nor in the coming together, can any of this be the self. So meaning, the self is not just one of these things. That's obvious. But then we might say, well, but the self is the aggregate, the combination of all these things. Then Khenpo Kumbel says, well, that contradicts the very notion of self, because one of the strongest characteristics when we think of self, when we feel self, is it's a unity. It's one thing. It's a unit, and it's independent. That's why self, other. So he says, so the self, cannot be the combination of many things. Of course, right there, you can see how Shantideva's point, so if there is a self, then that self merely arises based on designation, based on a projection. So then you call the collection of all these infinite numbers of factors, and then you put on a label on it and call self. So nominally existent. Just like when we say, oh, that's the football team. But the team is an abstract, right? It's a nominal label, team of 11 guys or 13, 2 reserve. The team, talking about soccer, football. The rest of the world knows it as football. So a team, 13, it's an abstract. It's an abstraction, sorry. So here then he continues, he says, then by the same token, and here he is commenting on the last line of 59, he says, by the same token, in the same way, the 6 types of consciousness, for example, like vision, cannot ever be that self. For these consciousnesses are a multiplicity. Again, not one thing on the one hand, and on the other hand, they are impermanent. Again, our definition of self, whether we use the word or not, assumes permanence. So then how can impermanent factors give rise to permanence? Not possible, he says. And then Khenpo Kumpel elaborates by quoting a sutra called the Pittaputra Sama-agama Sutra. Pittaputra Sama-agama Sutra, where it says, the elements of earth and water account for the body's constitution from teeth to skin. So the earth and water elements, meaning the earth, the atoms of solidity and fluidity, which is what the elements of earth and water are. The atoms of solidity with qualities of solidity and fluidity, they account for the body's physical constitution, from teeth to skin. The element of fire accounts for the body's warmth. Then there is the element of wind and that of space, corresponding to the body's cavities, the empty spaces in the body, together with the element of consciousness. When these 6 elements come together, then a personal identity is imputed, is projected onto them. and then becomes an object of fixation. But the I, the self as such, has no real independent existence of its own. And so then next he gives an example that is often used in the Mahayana sutras. It says, the situation is comparable to what might happen in the gathering twilight when one cannot see very clearly. So like as the sun sets, as we go into nightfall, so your vision, you cannot see very clearly, right? So then he says, one sees a striped rope and thinks that it is a snake. And he says, and this conviction will remain unshaken for as long as the circumstantial conditions persist. So the circumstantial conditions that persist in this example are things such as, it's dark, you cannot see very well. There is a rope in that room, coiled together. And perhaps you are unfamiliar, right, with that room or with that place. And then you have a fear of snakes to start with, like me. So immediately I think, oh, that's probably a snake. And then maybe earlier in the day, you when you first came here to this area, people were talking about how many snakes there are in this area. That further contributes, right, to the circumstantial conditions. So as long as all these conditions are present, then your conviction that yes, that is a snake will remain unshaken. Right? He says, Applying this example to the question in hand, the rope corresponds to the aggregates. The gathering twilight and unclear eyesight refer to the ignorance that gives rise to delusion. And the conviction that there is a snake corresponds to the belief in a self-identity. So he says, going further with this analogy, you may try to locate the snake, reaching out in the gloom with one's hand. If you're brave enough, you reach out with a hand, right? For me, I will like look for a long, long bamboo and try to poke it and see it's going to move or not, It says, you may reach out with the hand, but even though one's hand does not encounter anything, so even with the bamboo poking or with the hand not encountering anything, he says, it is difficult to shake off one's feeling that the snake is there and one is filled with dread. He says, in just the same way, one can examine the entire body, asking whether the head is the self or the hand and so on, only to find that they are not. But nevertheless, one might still be quite unsure as to the non-existence of the self. This only shows that the investigation has not penetrated to the crucial point. That the investigation, the analysis is not thorough, has not reached its crucial point. Now, if a bright lamp were to be set up in this dark house, illuminating the whole place, then no snake would be seen, but only a rope. At that point, one would realize one's mistake, meaning the crucial point has been reached. one would see that there was no snake and that one's earlier conviction is mistaken, and therefore fear will naturally subside. Or if it's me, I will still look around the room to make sure there is no second snake hiding somewhere. He continues, in just the same way, if this hesitant questioning, investigating, right, is supplanted by a firm conviction that the self which is grasped at as the personal identity of the five aggregates is nothing but a mere imputation, nothing but a mere projection. And when we become accustomed to this, then the absence of self will be clearly seen, and then the fear and the hopes that come with the self can dissolve. So Khenpo Kunpel continues, he says, so to this end, we have been instructed to examine where this sense of I arises, where it abides, and where it goes. So whenever this sense of self turns up, we are to look, we are to investigate. In accordance with this instruction, we should make a thorough investigation and should then simply rest in the state of finding nothing. As earlier we said, you search and search, and you find that the self is unfindable, then you rest in that unfindability. When we are unable to continue with this, we should proceed with the analytical meditation just described. These two kinds of meditation should be practiced alternately. They should be done back and forth. Yeah, so today we will stop here. And next Saturday, we will not have class because we have an in-person program at Urban Dharma, part of a series of 4 blessing, empowerment, and teachings related to the 4 Buddha activities. It is possible to participate through Zoom. So there is a registration landing page. Anyone who has that link, if you want to share in the chat, you can share that. So next Saturday, we will not have Shantideva. But this coming Tuesday, we will have class. Unfortunately, we are not planning to have translations for these 4 programs because it's an in-person program. It will be a little difficult. Basically, principally, I'm very glad that technology has allowed us to connect, those of us physically in different places on the other side of the world has allowed us to connect. And so I'm very happy and very grateful for that. But at the same time, I do have to take care of my most immediate physical group, which is, in Asheville. I have to make sure that Urban Dharma grows and is strong, and so this series of 4 programs are principally for that, for the local. But of course, if you can join on Zoom and you don't need translation and you are interested, then you can join. So just like I cannot take my local center for granted, I also want to take this opportunity to remind all of you that you cannot take your local center for granted. So please think of ways in which you can support your local center. Even if you feel like the local center, it's not as, I don't connect, so deeply or so excitedly with them. This is the Mahayana path, It's not just about me. Recognize that your local center, for all the qualities and the faults, principally it exists as a place where other people can encounter the teachings of the Buddha that can free us from suffering. And for that reason, don't take your local Dharma center for granted. So please do what you can to support your local Dharma center. And especially at many Dharma centers, I think all Dharma centers, always there's a core group of people who are working very hard. And they work, very hard. And it's a thankless job. I can see that, but thankfully, hopefully, thankfully, these core group of people working very hard understands that we're not doing this to get anyone to thank us, but this is part of that Bodhisattva vow. That vow cannot just be on the mouth, that vow needs to be carried out, needs to be applied. That means, again, getting out of your house. Of course, if you have health reasons that you can't do that, there are other ways you can support your local Dharma center. This pandemic has, one of the side effects is, I think, it has kind of fed some of us, our kind of very introverted, very, individualistic tendencies. Has made us very comfortable to just shut out. But you have to give back. Otherwise, it doesn't work. And you give back to sentient beings, mother sentient beings. There's no better place to do that than your local Dharma centers. Dharma centers are not free from drama. Dharma centers sometimes can be drama centers. But if you give up on your local Dharma center, you're not likely to invest in anywhere else. To liberate sentient beings. So if there's a lot of drama, you go to dissipate drama. So don't go, to add to the drama. Also, don't run away. You go, and in your little small way, you dissipate drama. Have a good weekend, and I'll see you all on Tuesday. Changchu Semjo Rinpoche Magye Banam Ge Gyurche Geba Nyam Pa Bepa Bonen Gongdu Bewar Shu Tata.
Gracias, Dr. Lai.
Thank you, Dr.
Dr.
Lai.
Lai.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Dr. Lai.
Gracias.
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 Bye. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lai.